if they broke it, they bought it, whether it's your mental health, your physical health, you earned through that contract the right to get fixed. So get fixed. But that doesn't mean you're a broken veteran. That just means that you overcame another challenge in your life and that you are this civic asset to continue to kick ass on behalf of our communities and our country. Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze.
This week is Army-Navy week. It's America's game, but in contrast with the broken veteran narrative. We're going to dive into Warrior Money on the disability dilemma. Let's jump into it. Dan Kunze, you saw, obviously, the Washington Post op-ed about whether veterans are fraudsters enough if they use their benefits. It was from Ted Johnson. What were your thoughts?
You know, I think it's interesting. Let's go back a little bit, just like not to frame that article. The article says something that there's a conversation to be had, but there's also the reality of being in service. And I think you and I both know this. You wake up 10, 15 years after your last day in uniform and something hurts a little bit more than it did before, or there was an ankle injury that you had that you didn't necessarily realize in the moment, or you had a back injury, or you cramped yourself that you didn't really know. And all of a sudden you're realizing that toll that your body took when you were in service is now paying a dividend later. So I think the reality is your job as a service member or as an employee of an organization is to accurately catalog and characterize the injuries and ailments you had while you were in service, right? So like if you had a slight ankle injury, I had a great NCO that would tell me, hey man, go to the medic, just get a note. Like you don't need to do a lot with it. Just go do that, right? But so I think the conversation that we're having is whether or not the things that accrue during your time in service, how do you represent them accurately 10, 15, 20, 30 years after your time in service? And what qualifies or what classifies as a big enough condition for you to have to report? And I think that's a different question necessarily. And I don't think it's clearly not black and white. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, listen, I agree with that. I think the bottom line is, when you raise your right hand, you support and defend the Constitution, you wear the cloth of our country, you're giving the country, a blank check that they could, even give up to the ultimate sacrifice, your death. But if they broke it, they bought it, right? I mean, if they hurt you physically or mentally, that we have this covenant that we got to support our brothers and veterans. But here's the numbers, and I think, Dan, this is why it's important. I was looking at it. 55% of Americans think if you go in the military, you will be broken. You will either have a physical or a mental ailment. And the reality of it is that's not necessarily the case. They also believe, though, the American public, they think that when they ask, hey, this is from a foundation, and they said, how many veterans do you think have a loss of a limb, a loss of an arm, a leg, that served in Iraq or Afghanistan, et cetera, in the current wars? They said 3 million was the number they gave. When the reality of it is, it's about 2,000, right? Because there's like this broken veteran narrative. And that's why I think what we do on Warrior Money is so important, because we tell people how, veterans are these civic assets. You can be business leaders, leverage better your GI Bill, leverage better, obviously, the incredible opportunities that you have in the military. But I do say, when you look at, of the 1.9 million veterans that served in Iraq or Afghanistan, more than half of those, served multiple deployments. 300,000 of them were in the National Guard. But since 9/11, there's been about 1.2 million veterans of our brothers and sisters that have utilized the VA healthcare system. So clearly it's there as a backstop, to get treated if you're injured.
I couldn't agree with you more. So let's talk about this, because I think in the veteran space, I'm not sure that there's a better advocate for veterans being civic assets as you. I don't know that I know anybody in the space that's as vocal about telling the good and positive stories of what service looks like. I think that's where the reason why people believe what they believe is they see on television or on billboards or in homeless shelters or wherever they're getting their narrative, that the story is that people are broken from their time in service. And it certainly makes for good news, or makes for good television, or at least attracting news or television to show blood and to show despair and all those bad things, right? But what they're not doing the right job of is also characterizing the hope that comes with military service, the opportunity to level up, the financial, the physical, and the camaraderie benefits that come with it as well. And I think when I hear things about veterans being fraudsters or veterans being neglected or challenged, I also think about all my buddies and all your friends and all the people we know in our network that also are the first people to help one another. They're also the people that want you to do well, and they're all doing very, very well. And many of them would point back to the foundation they have in service. And I think your advocacy and Warrior Money's advocacy and what we're doing or what we're trying to do here is really hoping to reframe the narrative around what service means, why it matters, and then the fact that my last comment about this, the fact that Yahoo Finance, the largest business platform in the world, allows us to have a conversation just about veterans, also means it's a very unique space. And I will just say that there's also another really interesting. I think it's $250 billion of economic buying power that the veteran class represents every year. So not only is it a well-knit, tightly collected group, there's some economic power that comes with comes with being a veteran as well. So I think all those things come together. It's a really interesting space to be in.
Yeah, and I think that's why this week is such an important contrast, right? You have America's game, Army Navy, Saturday, December 13th in Baltimore. It switches every year. But you and I are
It's my
hosting,
favorite.
the
Yeah.
Army Navy, policy conference the day before with these incredible leaders in the public sector, in the private sector. Folks like Blake Hall, who we've had on Warrior Money, who was a founder, went to Vanderbilt, went 2 deployments in Iraq, earned a Purple Heart, earned decorated combat veteran, goes to Harvard Business School, starts what was that called Troop Swap, became Troop ID, is now called ID Me, now on Series E, worth $2.5 billion plus. So, but we also have other folks like Frank Finelli from Carlisle Financial. We have folks like U.S. Senator Dave McCormick, Republican from Pennsylvania, our senator there, who was a former 82nd Airborne Division. Chris DeLuzio, U.S. Congressman Democrat from Allegheny County in Pennsylvania. So, we have these great, phenomenal leaders talking about it. But do you think that they understand the contrast that's out there with what we all know and love, but also what the American people see for only $19 a month, how to get solve this massive problem that is
And
maybe a
no, man, I
disservice?
don't. No, I don't. Yeah, no, I don't. I don't think so. I think the problem exists in the world because we don't slow down enough to talk to one another. And I think that we're just trying to run so quickly by problems, maybe throw a couple dollars at the problem, feel good about it for a few seconds, then go from there. And I think that and again, you're good at this, but the problem with our community, the problem with the community in general, the national security community, the veteran community, the military community, is that there's a true, we don't want to talk about this. We don't talk about ourselves. We don't want to talk about where our service was. We don't want to talk about the benefits that we use because maybe we're prideful that I didn't need any help to get my degree. Or, hey, I was so senior, I don't want to talk about the fact that I used the VA home loan when I was in my 20s or 30s to get my first house. Or maybe I don't want to talk about the fact that I don't really know what I'm doing right now because my service is over and I don't know where to transition. And nobody taught me that businesses have to generate revenue. Like, I didn't know those things. And so I think when we think about the group that's going to be in a room together, they're all well intended. They all look and present well. But I think the thing that I've learned is that there's a level, maybe not of insecurity, but there's definitely a level of not wanting to overexpose because there's a kind of fearfulness. And I think it's really clean in my mind that the veterans community specifically has that problem. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
you've
look, I
spent
look
you've
at it
spent
like,
you've spent most of your life in this space though. Like you've been ever since you ran for Congress back in '06. It was '06. You have kind of been in this world. When you think about how you communicate your value proposition, when you think about how you align behind your communications, what do you think people should hear and understand about that?
Well, I think what they're hearing is the victim narrative, right? They're hearing, and that's why in the media, if it bleeds, it leads, and they get overwhelmed by that stuff. And it's again only $19 a month and all that stuff. And it ticks me off because veterans are civic assets. So I led when I ran for Congress at age 33, saying, "Hey, listen, yeah, I think the other guy should be fired, but let me tell you why I should be hired. This is my plan. This is what I'm going to do." And one of those things was we need a post 9/11 GI Bill. But I also talked about, we got to make sure we take care of our brothers and sisters, right? I don't want to, talk or drill down too much on the victim narrative, but there are our brothers and sisters that fall through the cracks. And we do have this ethic that you and I agree with that we leave them all behind. And we got to make sure we take care of them. But we also have to do twice as much to amplify the positive stuff. It ticked me off, Dan, when I watched on Netflix, the Nike movie, right? And it was about Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman starting Nike and
Didn't
how,
even tell
Bill
people.
Bowerman, yeah, Bill Bowerman was his track coach at the University of Oregon, and Phil Knight was the student athlete. I actually texted Ben Affleck because I got to know him through the years, and I was like, "Yo, dude, you play Phil Knight. He was in the Army. He's an Army RC thing." And Bill Bowerman, by the way, was the combat veteran of World War II with the 10th Mountain Division that earned his Silver Star. Most veterans don't know that, you know, Nike was started by two Army veterans. And we do not do a good job at amplifying our brothers and sisters. We do not do a good job at showing the positive stuff because they are great Americans. And it's okay to show, some flowers to people like Blake Hall at ID Me or Alex Swirsky, who led Johnson & Johnson, the largest healthcare company in the world, right? Those are the folks we got to, or Dawn Halfaker, who's a very successful entrepreneur, in the DC region. So my point there is like, I just wish, all the, naysayers, all the folks that are real quick to, talk about the broken veteran narrative, why don't you take just as much time talking about the heroes among us that are kicking ass and taking names?
I couldn't agree with you more. I like when you get I like when you get worked up. That's awesome. So let's talk about this. So veterans are excellent at operating in organizations. Talk to me a little bit about what an operator economy looks like, and how do you think we're moving through that direction, and like how do you think you veterans are uniquely positioned for that space?
Yeah, listen, it's what the leaders do. We solve pain points, right? What's the pain point? Half the veteran World War II came back home and they started a small business. It's less than 5% of our generation. So that's why you are seeing the operator economy. You're seeing builders, people, whether they're inside a company already or they're founding them or whether they're, just entrepreneurs, they are getting after it by seeing the problems out there. And a massive problem is this silver tsunami that's coming down the pike. There's 36 million small businesses across America. 80% of those small businesses do not have a succession plan. The majority of those businesses are small companies. Those small companies would love to have an operator, would love to have one of the 200,000 veterans who are or active service members who transition every single year that do want to go back to the home of record, that do want to go back and have, that cred of, hey, I led a platoon, I led a company, I led a battalion, whether you're a platoon sergeant or a platoon leader. And what I get pissed off about, and I tell veterans, and I help them when they transition through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Hiring Heroes, I say to them, like, hey, man, the Army's like a Fortune 2 size company. Talk to what you did, but remember, it's about the future, not your past. Your past that gave you that experience, gave you that operator mentality, but it's what you're going to do for them to solve their problems, their pain points, and to grow their business to be successful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yep. So hey, listen, Dan and I are going to be right back. We're talking more about the contrast this week of Army Navy Week versus the broken veteran narrative. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Where Your Money. All right, welcome back to Word Money. I'm Patrick Murphy. We got Dan Kunze with us too. We're hooking a job, and because why? It's Army Navy Week. This is America's game this Saturday, December 13th. But the day before, Dan and I are hosting with our buddies at SITREPS, the Army Navy Policy Conference at Johns Hopkins Business School. It's 11 to 4. We have phenomenal leaders, business leaders, political leaders, just flat out great Americans. So hopefully you can join us. Again, we were talking before the break. We were talking about how this week, we talk about, West Point and the Naval Academy. It's these 4,000 cadets that Navy, these 4,000 cadets at West Point, they are America's best. They literally produce more Rhodes and Oxford scholars than any other college and university in America, or at least top three. But every single one of them are athletes and scholars. It's basically these communities are the Athens and Sparta of America. But it is a contrast, though, with the narrative out there in the rest of America that there's like this broken veteran narrative. And, we talked about it in the beginning of the show, but, Ted Johnson wrote a Washington Post op-ed. He's a columnist. He's a U.S. Navy commander. He's retired. He's a graduate of Hampton University, Harvard, and Northwestern, where he has doctorates. But, he talked about basically the culture of, our victims, fraudsters. And, he talked about like this culture. And what I tell people is when we talk about culture is actually upstream than politics. The politicians don't get it. It's in culture first. It's in social media. It's on television, etc. And that's what really drives change in America. But it is a change of, hey, are there folks out there potentially abusing the system?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people that are going to abuse the system in every organization, right? And so I'm glad that the first part of the show and our conversation was kind of like the macro level about do people in military culturally understand, but there's a problem with how we've talked about it. I don't think the answer is yes. I think the answer is probably a maybe, probably a strong maybe, if not a no. I think if we're bringing this down to the lens of like local veterans and personal finance, and we're talking about the juxtaposition between fraudsters or appropriately using your benefits, I just have to also suggest that they probably wouldn't create a service disabled veteran small business if they were really trying to get you jammed up, right? So what we ought to do is really take a good inventory of where we are and then be able to understand that to be able to move us forward, right? Like if you have the SDVOSB opportunity set, maybe you can apply that to a small business that you acquire. Maybe you apply it to a small business that you already run and operate. And then what you get is preferred contracts. So, or you have the ability to bid on preferred contracts. And so, Patrick, I think the conversation, like the way that I hear that article, I read the article, I think about the conversation that we're having, like, what does it mean for me to claim an ankle injury or a knee injury or a hand injury that I sustained at some point in time, right? What it means to you is lifetime and economic earnings. It also is an opportunity set, right? It doesn't mean you're broken. And I suffered from this as well. I didn't want to claim benefits. I don't want to claim that I'm disabled. I didn't want to do that because that means that I'm broken. And if I'm broken, then I can't do. But that's not how that's now I've learned to view using the benefits out of the VA.
Yeah,
I think you've made this. Good.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think you and I both struggle with this, that we both went to community college, right? We don't lead that, hey, we both earned our law degree. We both worked our asses off through college and joining the military, et cetera. And I do think it's a narrative. I mean, I told you, at the beginning of this year, I'm going to try to be a little bit more thoughtful and be a little bit more, frankly, authentic, talking about some of my weaknesses. And the fact that when I transitioned out of the Army, when I was a young captain, I was unemployed for 4 months. I wrote a whole Substack on it, right? And that was no joke, living on ramen noodles and peanut butter and jelly. But, I let people know, like, hey, when you saw Patrick Murphy, interview for jobs, et cetera, yeah, I had a shirt and tie on and a sports coat, et cetera. But, I was on a struggle bus, but I wasn't acting like I was on a struggle bus. And I think that was what I took away, from that Washington Post article. He's like, hey, don't be, and I want to quote him. He's like, don't be the Walking Dead. Like, like, hey, are you basically, in the beginning, you don't want to say you're hurt, because, they might not, they might not be able to get you basic training.
I can very clearly remember. I very clearly remember time when I was in service where I didn't want to tell people that I jammed something up. I don't want to tell people anything about that happened because all of a sudden that means you're in training, you're going to get recycled, or in service, you're like, I can't do my job. And so there's a cult, to your point, there's like a cultural shift that has to happen. And it's really hard. It's really hard to make that cultural shift to start to, hey, like I'm a little bit broke, but not like broke in the bad sense, but broke in the sense that I've paid my dues and paid my taxes and paid my toll. And now my toll is my body telling me that it's time for me to benefit there. So I agree with you. I very clearly remember not wanting to go to like medical because I didn't want to get recycled during
No doubt.
my courses because I'm like I didn't want to do it.
No doubt. Yeah, listen, I remember calling Cadence in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. There was 90-some degrees in the summer of 96. And, someone, I was done calling Cadence to go back in formation. And he's like, hey, Cadet Murphy, you walk with a little bit of lip there? And I was like, oh, sorry. Like, no, sorry. Hey, you are a little bit. Go check that with the bathroom. I was like, and in my head, I'm like, I'm going to go eat some Ranger candy. When I get back to my, to my locker, I had some Advil, right? That was
Drink more
Ranger
water.
candy. All right.
Drink
So
more
listen,
water.
we talked before the show about some calls to action. The first one is don't be part of the Walking Dead. Um, if you're hurt, the contract says if the government broke you, they paid for it. So get it fixed. Do what you got to do to get back on the right track. You are an American civic asset to this nation. You're more likely to be employed. You're more likely to start a small business and for that small business to be successful. You're more likely to vote in elections. You're more likely to be a little league coach or a pastor in your church. So keep kicking ass. All right, call to action 2. Is that all right? We talked about out there the folks that are trying to, frankly, there's a difference between someone who wants to coach you, the Veterans for Foreign Wars, some other the for-profit entities that are really trying to help our brothers through veterans that if they have to put in a claim versus the predators out there. How would you be more discerning as an American veteran, Dan?
I would tell you that I would do the same thing that I do with anything. I would ask somebody and ask my network. I would go through a referral network, right? Like if somebody comes to me, you better believe that I'm going to vet them based on who we know. And if they don't know anybody that I know, I'm not sure who they are and they don't know who I am. I think we're going to do a kind of a hard pass on that game. That's a tale of old as time. People do and work with people because they've got a relationship with them, a referral from them, right? If you're new to me or if you're new because I've got a new problem set, I'm certainly going to research multiple organizations. I'm going to look them up and I'm comparing one to one another. Like, I think that's just the way you got to do it. And I think that part of the conversation for us, and you talk about this, we talk about this a lot. Like you've got to meet more people. So when you meet more people, you learn more things, and then you have the ability to connect across different people and find the services that you may need. So I think the answer to the question, and I think this is the same thing for everybody at the personal finance, the personal level. Like if your referral network doesn't give it to you, you probably need to figure out why. And if it sounds too good to be true, you should probably figure out why it sounds so good. And then 3, don't sign anything that you don't know what you're doing. Like have somebody else read it, run it through ChatGPT, do something to like have another set of eyes on there. Cause you don't want a sneaky contract clause in there that you're not going to be able to figure out. So I think we started this conversation talking about like our vets fraudsters. Are you okay if you're doing this? Like people are trying to scam you because there's $250 billion of economic value in our veteran community every year. They know you have a guaranteed paycheck from the government. Well, mostly guaranteed paycheck from the government. They know you've got all these benefits, right? So they're trying to get a piece of the action as well. So if they're trying to come for you for your money, you got to be really careful about who you give it to.
Yep, no doubt. I think the last thing that the article talked about is modernizing the VA, not just not the VA overall, but also veterans healthcare and the veterans benefits. I talked about that, but I thought the one other thing was how you got to audit your own paperwork when you're in service and when you're out. I know for me, listen, I'm an old head, man. I left Fort Bragg, North Carolina back in 2004. I was back for my second employment. I brought my DD 214. I had to go to that. We had to check, like, pen and ink, check out the out processing stuff. But they kept putting me in for that. I won some Air Force Achievement Award. And I'm like, ma'am, I didn't get this award. I was in the Air Force. I was in the Army. I jumped out of airplanes, one C-130s and C-5. But I'm like, I didn't earn this. She goes, it's on your records. I said, ma'am, listen, I need you to take it off. I went back twice. And they still basically had on it. Now I went back eventually. I had to like literally sign out that it was accurate. Even though I was there for the third time, it was still coming up when they printed it out in the printer, which was in another building. And I was like, God bless America. Like, right. And I was like, I got to get out, but I got to get my equipment. Like I was moving out. I don't want to pay another, month of rent. I was like, I was driving back to Pennsylvania. And, but I mean, listen, within days I got it fixed because I had to go to another, it was called, but like, 3 times I went in person just to fix this one thing. But to our brother and sister folks on active service, or if you're a veteran, go back, dust off, look at your records, look at your DD-14, look at what it says and make sure it's right, because you don't have to go do that or track down things, when you're 70 years old and saying, hey, what do you mean my Bronze Star for service in Iraq wasn't there? Or, hey, what do you mean, when I was injured, it wasn't there? You got to be on top of it.
Yeah, I think that's the conversation to be had about our claiming benefits, or at least claiming problems, right? And so I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's the documentation that matters. And what they're really saying is, are you making stuff up or not? So just don't make stuff up. And if you see them making it up, don't do that either. I think it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of the cadet creed at West Point. Our cadets shall not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate those who
Lie,
do.
cheat, or steal. Yep.
Yep. And the reality of it is, when you wear the colors of our country, you're a soldier for life. You're a leader character. And so the overwhelming majority, are doing it the right way, doing what they're entitled to, all that stuff. But there are folks out there trying to exploit the system. So, all right, Dan, listen, parting advice. What are you hoping to get out of this contrast week, this Army-Navy policy conference, Army-Navy game? What are you hoping to get out of it? And what lessons learned do you think you'll get that you could share?
I am hoping to, well, we started this 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, we talked about how what we wanted to do is create a room where we brought people together to solve hard problems, right? And I thought that the community that we were building in, and I remember the words that I said at work when we had this conversation, like the people that are in this room and the people that we know in this room that we can connect to are the sorts of people that are going to solve the hard problems that we're dealing with, right? So when we deliberately put together finance, sports, entertainment, technology, entrepreneurship, like when we have that all together, it's because we now know and have a network of capital. We have a network of entrepreneurs and technologists. We've got a network of entertainers and media folks. So we can amplify message at scale that I think is really, really impressive, and that their growth, that's really impressive. So that's what I'm hoping to get out of it, is the right people in the right rooms, having a conversation, being seen as a leader, bring people together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a guy like Nate Boyer who's going to join us there. Flo Groberg, Medal of Honor recipient. We mentioned other political leaders like Dave McCormick and obviously Chris DeLuzio, members of Congress. That's awesome. But in the private sector, just folks who are really paying it forward for brothers and sisters and showing them the way. So I'm pumped too. I know it's going to be a great week. And again, we talk about the policy that I believe in, that the government signed the contract with you. If they broke it, they bought it, whether it's your mental health, your physical health, you earned through that contract the right to get fixed. So get fixed. But that doesn't mean you're a broken veteran. That just means that you overcame another challenge in your life and that you are this civic asset to continue to kick ass on behalf of our communities and our country. So with that, we're going to wrap up this week's edition of Where Money. Make sure you check out our podcast wherever you get them. So we're talking about Amazon Music, we're talking about Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you get them, but also on Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you again next week.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.